Yo, what is up, guys? It's your boy Mike. You already know what is up and what is good. And as you guys can tell by the title and thumbnail of this video, today I'm going to be finally talking about how the Pacers may be the second best team in the East, part 2. A video my fellow Pacers fans have been waiting for, urging to watch and me to make, and have been anticipating. So let me just jump right into it. So now first I'm going to start off with a few corrections that I have from my first video in part 1, so let me get into those. So my first one is actually how I said the Pacers beat the Bucks in the season series 2-1 when that was actually 3-1, so my fault there. There's a correction. So my second one had to go on defense, the defensive side of the ball. I mentioned how the Pacers were third in steals when they're actually second in steals. I must have had a filter on or something when I looked in the stats, so they were actually second in steals, guys. Like I mentioned in the first video in part 1, their team is filled with defensive specialists. You got Thad Young, Miles Turner down low, Oladipo, Collison, and even Corey Joseph. I'm pretty sure he's our best defensive guard. His perimeter defense is really good when defending point guards and players that are actually bigger than him. I actually noticed how he's actually decent at guarding players that are bigger than him. I left him out in the first video, so I want to make sure to get a really good emphasis on him in this video because he was actually one of our key players off the bench as well. So huge shout out to Corey Joseph for the Pacers fans and my fellow Pacers fans out there. So Corey Joseph was a huge part, you know, just getting in those passing lanes, ripping people, and also contributing to those fast break points and points off transition and turnovers. They were actually second in steals, guys, not third, second in steals. Now, I did mention also how they were 11-2. I kind of made it sound like that was their record in the clutch, when actually that was the record in the clutch post All-Star break. So post All-Star break, they were 11-2 in the clutch, and that stood at third best in the NBA. So the Sixers, they always have this excuse where they're such a young team and unexperienced. Well, this Pacers team is actually now younger than them, and actually was younger than them last year, but yet they perform better in the clutch, so there's no excuse there. That's why you guys see that in the Celtics and Sixers series, the Sixers cannot finish out games. Yes, they were close at the end, but still, you have to have a team accountable for closing a game. And this team is definitely one of those teams you can count on to close a game. And even they are younger than this team, in the Sixers, they still performed better in the clutch, 11-2 after the All-Star break, having the third best record post All-Star break. They do still have the sixth best record in the clutch, which was 25-15. They still have that record, sixth best in the clutch at 25-15. So let me move on to my next points that are points in this video that I feel like are nice additions to this team. I mentioned in my first video how the Pacers were 5th fewest in turnovers and how they have really good defensive, high IQ, disciplined point guards. Both point guards are first and second string point guards in Corey Joseph and Darren Collison. They are both top 8 in assist to turnover ratio. They can really dish out the ball and get players set up to score without turning the ball over. That's really effective, especially in the playoffs, if you can have point guards that can't turn the ball over or that don't. Corey Joseph and Darren Collison are both top 8, Corey Joseph being second in all of the NBA in assist to turnover ratio, and Darren Collison in 8th. And I also looked at their assist ratio rather than their assist to turnover ratio, and also they were both in the top 10 as well. Darren Collison was actually 9th, and Corey Joseph was actually 3rd. So again, like I said, I want to put a lot of emphasis on Corey Joseph this video because I did kind of leave him out in the first video a little bit. How he was also one of our main key guys off the bench, a real hustle guy and really good at defense. So shout out to him. Corey Joseph was 3rd in the NBA in assist ratio, and Darren Collison was 9th. Also, guys, the Pacers didn't have a single losing season record against any playoff team in the East except for just one. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was just one team, and it was the Toronto Raptors. That was the one team they struggled with in the East, but that's the only team that they had a losing record against. All the others were tied or they won the season series, but they won most of them. Let me move on to my clutch fact. Guys, the further I looked in the clutch factor of this team, the better the facts got. I only have a few here, but they're actually really good. So let me start off with this one. The Pacers had the best defensive rating in the clutch, guys. The Pacers had the best defensive rating in the clutch, and that goes along to how they averaged the least points allowed in the clutch. They had the best defensive rating in the clutch, and also they had the second lowest turnover ratio in the clutch. Now, if you look at the Sixers, that's one team that's always put ahead of them. And like I said, guys, you can't be a successful team in the playoffs and turn the ball over, so especially in the clutch. So the Sixers actually had the 4th highest turnover ratio in the clutch, and the Pacers actually had the 2nd lowest. You can't be a successful team in the playoffs and turn the ball over. And also, guys, the Pacers were 2nd best in points off turnovers in the clutch. So guys, they were on both sides of the ball, guys. They're a really good defensive team, and they were real disciplined with the ball. They could score on you, get smart plays, and after that, they could get back on defense, force turnovers on you, and they'd score off those. So they were 2nd best in points off turnovers in the clutch. So like I said, they're on defense and offense. Guys, this is my next point, and I think this is really a good one too. All these facts are from last year's team, and they got better in the offseason. So take these stats that I'm saying from this video and last video and add better players, more versatile lineups that you can put out there. The stats will get only better from here. So like I said, guys, this is only last year's team. This isn't even including this year's team, and they got better. Now I'm going to move on to how they performed against playoff teams in the East. Guys, the Pacers were tied at 2nd in the best record against current Eastern Conference playoff teams at 14-12. Now, in my first video in part 1, I did mention how the Pacers were one of 3 teams to have an above 500 record against current playoff teams in the East altogether. So they were actually one of 4, but I didn't count one team because one team was the Cavs and that team was gone. So I did say one of 3 teams. They're actually still kind of one of 3 teams if you think about it. So guys, let me repeat that. The Pacers were tied at 2nd for the best record against current playoff teams in the Eastern Conference altogether, 14-12. So they were tied with Miami, and Toronto and Cleveland were tied at 1st at 15-11. They had better records than Philly, Milwaukee, and Washington. And you notice how those are teams that are always put ahead of Indiana in the conversation on how they're better than them, because you guys always hear it's Philly and Boston, and then someone always slips to Milwaukee in there or Washington ahead of Indiana. But again, guys, like I mentioned in my first video, and if you didn't watch my Sixers video, if you're a Pacers fan, go watch that video too, because I do talk about the Pacers a lot in that video as well. I talked about how the Sixers don't perform well against conference playoff teams, but the Pacers, they really do. They had a better record against playoff teams in the East combined than Philly, Milwaukee, and Washington. 3 teams that are always put ahead of them in the conversation of who is the best teams in the East right now, because Indiana is always being left out for some odd reason. That is a key fact to put in here. And also, guys, that list of playoff teams when they played each other in the Eastern Conference, Philly had the 2nd worst record against current playoff teams in the East combined, and Milwaukee had the worst record at 9-17, and Philly was 10-17, not even an above 500 record. But yet they're still put ahead of Indiana, ahead of Milwaukee, ahead of Toronto. But they can't even beat out Eastern Conference playoff teams in the alleged weak Eastern Conference. So that's one fact that I proved that wrong. So Philly had the 2nd worst record when playing Eastern Conference playoff teams combined, and then the Bucks had the worst record at 9-17 and Philly at 10-16. And guys, the Pacers, amongst these 6 teams, Philly, Indiana included, Boston, Toronto, Washington, and Milwaukee, against those teams, when those teams all played each other combined, the Pacers had the best record against those 6 teams when playing each other all combined, 11-8. Guys, get this. Philly came in last, 7-12. Milwaukee, 2nd to last, 8-11. But yet, it's always Philly ahead of Indiana, Milwaukee ahead of Indiana. They're always mentioned more and, quote, better than this team, but yet they can't beat better teams, but Indiana has. I don't get why the Sixers and Bucks get this pass for not even beating conference playoff teams, but the Pacers, on the other hand, are easily beating these teams, but yet they are still left out of the conversation for teams on the rise in the Eastern Conference next year, or teams that are expected to be good next year. That still blows my mind how this team is always left out, but their competitors in the East and Washington, Milwaukee, Philadelphia. Guys, I'm going to be making my early playoff seedings, and I'm gonna give my records and everything for every team. So I'm gonna get into this as well when I make that video. So let me just reiterate: the Pacers, compared to other playoff teams in the East, tied at second best record at 14-12, and that 14-12 record was better than Philly, Milwaukee, and Washington. Philly being second to last at 10-16, and Milwaukee being dead last at 9-17. Not even breaking double-digit wins against playoff teams in the East, but yet they're always quick to slip Milwaukee in the conversation, and they're always quick to just bolster Philly in the conversation when they don't perform well at all against teams that are just as good, or teams that they're, quote, better than in Indiana, but they're really not. Let me reiterate this: amongst the 6 teams, Philly, Indiana, Boston, Toronto, Washington, and Milwaukee, those 6 teams that are kind of like those locked-in playoff teams for next year, quote, the competitors in the East, when those teams played against each other this season, their records against each other combined, the Pacers had the best record against all of them and out of all of them when playing each other all combined at 11-8. Philly had the worst record when playing against those teams all combined, 7-12. Not even double-digit wins. And Milwaukee came in second to last, and 8-11. Pacers had the better record and the best record out of those 6 teams when playing each other. This team is slept on because really the winning streak the Sixers had at the end of the season kind of skewed people's minds to thinking the Sixers were a big deal when they were beating not good teams at all. And then they got to the second round and they didn't have to face LeBron and the Cavs in the first round, so that kind of skewed people's minds. And for some reason, that 7-game series that the Pacers and Cavs had escaped people's minds for some reason. But don't worry, guys, those Pacers fans out there, come next season, just wait, we'll still be a sleeper team in the East, and they'll see exactly what we did to them last year, but we'll do it to other teams in the East this year. And trust me, those teams won't have LeBron. So let me know what you guys think about this Pacers team. I definitely, and I still think they're a top 3 seed in the East. My top 3 are Boston, Toronto, and Indiana. Again, that crazy Kawhi Leonard trade, I had Toronto actually in the 2nd seed already, but I definitely still see the Pacers being a top 3 seed in the East. So guys, thanks for watching this video. Let me guys know what you think about the points that I made in this video. Where do you think this Pacers team will stand next year? And guys, I just can't wait for this season to start. I just wish the season could start right now, like tomorrow, right now. I don't even care when. I'm just excited for the season to start. So many new teams, new faces, new franchise players on other teams. So I just can't wait for this team, especially the Pacers team, to really just outshine their expectations once again and just prove people wrong. So guys, thank you for watching this video. It's been Mike, and you can let that beat drop.